The things that made you safe and happy when you were a child aren't necessarily the things that make you safe and happy when you're an adult. Anxiety is an emotion. Anxiety is the emotion that tells you something you need to pay attention to.
Pain is a real thing, and pain management is needed in some cases, but I think a lot of people psych themselves up, and your mind is very, very powerful, and it can create pain, physical pain.
She was hiding chocolate. She was getting up in the middle of the night to eat chocolate. And she said, this is so ingrained. I've done this all my life.
Getting to the root of these problems and dealing with them at a subconscious level is the key. However you go about doing that. I did it through psychedelics, and that just worked for me. Welcome back to the Tim Teaches podcast. I'm your host, Tim McCoy. Today, I have the pleasure of being joined by Sarah Wellband. She's a qualified control system practitioner specializing in remedial hypnosis. And we're about to find out what remedial hypnosis is. I'm super excited. Thank you so much for joining me. If you wouldn't mind, kind of give a little introduction about yourself, and we'll take it from there.
Sure. Hi, Tim. Thank you very much for having me on your show.
Absolutely.
And remedial hypnosis, it's a term that most people won't be aware of, but it's similar to hypnotherapy. The big difference being is that we don't use trance. So when people think of hypnosis or hypnotherapy, they either think of stage hypnosis, where people are made to do stupid things in the name of entertainment, which is fine, or hypnotherapy, which is when you're put into a trance to stop smoking or to deal with a phobia or something like that. So remedial hypnosis uses hypnotic techniques, but we don't use a trance element. So you're not put to sleep, you're wide awake, you can participate in what's going on, but it's just as effective as hypnotherapy in dealing with everything from anxiety to weight problems, pain management, PTSD, trauma, basically a huge range of both mental and physical issues that come from the mind.
That's right up my alley. PTSD, mental health issues, that's my jam. How'd you get into this field? Had you experienced it yourself, or did you just...
So I've been in Portugal for 18 years now, and I was lucky enough to indulge my love of horses. I have currently 5 horses. Before the pandemic, we were doing what's called equine assisted training, which is communication training with horses. Horses are brilliant at teaching people how to use their body language and non-verbal communication. But then COVID came along and we had to shut everything down. I was very bored, so I started studying cognitive behavioral therapy, which is the bedrock of changing how the way that you think, or learning about how the way that you think affects the way that you behave. If you change one, you can change the other. Mm-hmm. As part of my studies, I came across a guy called Tim Box, who devised a control system. I got in touch with him, did the training with him, and I qualified. So I started practicing, and it's so empowering. It's so life-changing for people. I absolutely love it.
So how are you working with people? Are you doing online Zoom meetings
It's pretty much all online, because I live in a very rural part of Portugal. I would say that 90% of the work I do is online.
I'm just kind of curious what the process is. If you have a client come on, how do you kind of start working with them?
Okay, so the first thing I do is I always have an initial consultation. It's really important to make sure, one, that the problem that the person wants to deal with is something that I can deal with, something I'm qualified to deal with, and something I can help with. It's important that we get on with each other. If you're having a therapeutic relationship, you've got to have some sort of rapport. Mm-hmm. And also to make sure that their subconscious mind is willing and able to communicate. Mm-hmm. So to explain that, you've got 2 parts to your mind effectively. You've got your conscious mind, which is the part that can figure things out if you're using your conscious mind. Your conscious mind can only concentrate on a handful of things at a time. Mm-hmm. So if you're cooking a complicated meal, you can't be thinking about, I need to update my CV. You don't have that bandwidth in your head to do that. Mm-hmm. Your subconscious mind, on the other hand, doesn't have the ability to problem solve, but it's been there since your birth. So it's in charge of all your memories. It's in charge of your emotions. It's in charge of your imagination, your creativity. Basically, anything that you're not thinking about at any given time is being looked after by your subconscious mind. Okay. So the basic premise is that your subconscious kicked in really when you were born, and in that first 10 years of life, you absorb more information than you do at any other point during your life. So you are told things, you hear things, you see things, you learn at a prodigious rate. But what you don't have the ability to do is to decide whether what you're learning is correct or not. Mm-hmm. For example, you ask the average 5-year-old if they believe that a man in a red coat flies around the world one night of the year delivering presents to every child in the world. And the 5-year-old will go, yep, I have no problem with that concept whatsoever. So they get to age 10 and if the secret has not been revealed, they might go, you know what, I'm not quite sure about the physics of this whole concept. Yeah. But in that first really key decade, we learn lots of things and they become part of our core beliefs. So what we think about ourselves, what we think about other people, what we think about the world at large. So again, another fairly silly example, but if your mother was scared of mice or spiders and her reaction to seeing a spider was to scream and run out of the room, your young mind will go, okay, that's what we do when we see a spider. Now, years later, you may well say, that's ridiculous. I don't need to be afraid of spiders. But you will not stop that little internal reaction that goes, no, that's what we learned back then. And that's how we respond to spiders. I've been working with weight loss the last few months, working with a lot of clients with weight loss. And food is a really interesting one because when you're young, you are encouraged to eat. Mm-hmm. When you're young, if you're upset, if you're angry, if you're crying, you're given a cookie or a piece of chocolate. And that makes you feel better. So when you get to become an adult and you're faced with something that's upsetting you or a problem, your internal response is, oh, I know what will make me feel better, piece of chocolate. Mm-hmm. In fact, I'll have a whole chocolate bar because the more of chocolate I eat, the better I'm supposed to feel.
Until you don't.
So what I do is talk to the part of the subconscious which is still working on this outdated information. In computer terms, we're upgrading the system. So that strategy that worked when we were a child is no longer health. It's no longer working. Therefore, we need to change it and say that food is no longer a reward. Food is no longer anything other than nutrition and goodness. And yes, it's nice to eat, but we don't need to use it for emotional purposes. Mm-hmm.
So are you kind of clearing out all of that programming that people have from their earlier years and kind of rewiring their brain to be able to observe things?
The subconscious, again, if you think of a child, the subconscious is trying to keep the child happy and safe. Mm-hmm. And those are the two things you need to survive. You need to be safe, you need to actually get to adulthood, and preferably you'd like to be happy. So the things that made you safe and happy when you were a child aren't necessarily the things that make you safe and happy when you're an adult. A really good example is public speaking, which is something that a lot of people have a problem with. They hate it. And that's because when they were in junior school, they maybe stood up and gave a presentation and they were laughed at and they made a mess of it. And a little bit of their subconscious goes, we're never doing that again because that was an awful experience and I'm going to protect you by stopping you doing that in the future. Then you get into your early 20s and your boss says, listen, can you do a presentation? That part goes, no, we're not doing that. Yeah. So again, that's the part we need to say, okay, the job you were doing then was fine. It was good. We need you to change now. We need you to stop doing that job or do it differently. It doesn't necessarily have to come from childhood. Most things do, but trauma, for example. So if you have something that happens to you, let's say a car accident, and you can say after the car accident, okay, the other driver was drunk or they were texting or the road was unsafe. That's what happened. I don't need to worry about it. But sometimes trauma happens and it's random. Nobody could predict it. Nobody can explain what happened. And a part of the subconscious will say, okay, I need to figure out what happened so that we can avoid it in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And to do that, I'm going to keep running. I'm going to give you flashbacks, intrusive thoughts, memories, all these things, not to hurt you, but to solve the conundrum of what happened.
I kind of got a little bit of a story about that. Like, so my brother was killed in a car accident in 2007, riding in a vehicle with a drunk driver. And now me, even, 17 years later, I have the hardest time riding in a car with somebody if they're driving. If I'm driving, no big deal, but I cannot. I'm freaked out the entire time, no matter who it is driving. Man, I need to work on this.
I've been really happy to work with you on that because, again, it's that little bit of your subconscious which believes it's doing a really good job because we know what happened before, so therefore we're not going to be safe. And that little part just needs to know that it's a different situation. You don't have to do this anymore. But yeah, it's very happy to work with you on that.
Cool. Yeah, it's definitely been a problem, and I feel bad, but, I'll go on a 15-hour drive with somebody and they'll be like, oh, I'll drive part of the time and you rest. And I literally will just jump up and freak out for no reason.
That's a very practical application that I can help with. I've worked with doctors, with dentists, with company CEOs, it's got very practical applications.
Yeah. I don't know if you've listened to any of my stuff, research about it. I did, ayahuasca back in December of last year because of all my traumas that I've dealt with military and law enforcement and stuff that I was in. And, it kind of, I don't know the science behind it, but it kind of does the same thing. But if you could get the same kind of healing without having to go to South America and
that's
sit in the jungle or whatever.
Yeah.
This place is in Costa Rica and it's nice, but it costs a lot of money and you got to travel. And so being able to do something online and receive some sort of healing without, going through all that, because it's an experience, man, I'm super interested in learning how that comes about.
I'd love to. One of the reasons I love what I do is it's very empowering because as part of the 3-session protocol, there's a last session I teach you actually how to talk to yourself because it's your mind we're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can teach people how to deal with their own issues, then, that's brilliant for them. They can understand themselves. It's not a drug. It's not an external thing.
Mm-hmm.
Your mind is working for you, but it's just getting things a bit wrong.
I'm kind of curious to bring it back to Santa Claus because, I got my son. And so Christmas is fun and Santa Claus, we tell them it's real. Are we doing our children a disservice by teaching them these things and they're being let down? Or
no, I think we all recognize that, that there are things growing up that are age appropriate, like the Tooth Fairy and Santa Claus and Easter Bunny. I don't know if Easter Bunnies in the States.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So, no, I think that's all part of childhood. Lots of children have imaginary friends, and that's fine. No.
I'm curious about imaginary friends because, I kind of believe that some of this research, some of the things I've read or learned, they say a lot of people kind of separate from their spirit when they're about 5 years old. And so I wonder if imaginary friends are children being still kind of connected to another, I know it sounds woo, but
I must admit, that's not something I would believe in, but I have nothing against other people's beliefs. I think that the subconscious is in charge of your imagination, and our imagination is so powerful, especially in children.
Yeah.
That having an imaginary friend can be a great comfort, especially if, you don't know what's going on in the world or things are changing. Perhaps you're changing school or moving house and mum and dad's splitting up, something like that. Having that, some people will have physical things like biting their nails or sucking their hair or stuff like that. But self-soothing with an imaginary friend, I think, is great.
Yeah.
It just shows that
until what age?
Well, I'm 61 and my friend's still here.
Perfect. Hello. Um,
I don't know. Have you ever seen the movie Drop Dead Fred?
yes,
With
it's
Kate
hilarious.
and Rick Mail.
Yeah.
For me, that is a perfect therapy movie. I mean, the last 20 minutes are just pure therapy.
Yeah, it's been a long time, but yeah, definitely
Okay.
fun. So so people, what's kind of your normal client that's coming to you, and what are they trying to resolve? Is it just all over the place, or is there a lot of people who
Yeah,
are dealing with the same thing?
there are so many different things. The obviously anxiety is a huge issue. Social anxiety, health anxiety, general anxiety. Anxiety is an interesting one because people often think of anxiety as an illness or a disorder or something bad. Anxiety is an emotion. Anxiety is the emotion that tells you something you need to pay attention to. So, for example, when you leave your house in the morning and you just check your pockets to make sure that you've got your house keys, that's a tiny little bit of anxiety saying, if you close the door now and your keys are on the inside, you've got a problem later on.
Mm-hmm.
Anxiety means that when you step out into the street, you look both ways. So if you didn't have any anxiety whatsoever, you probably wouldn't get through a day.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you'd be squished.
Yeah, it's not a bad thing.
So when people can understand that anxiety is trying to tell you something. So you've got a 5-year-old child.
Yep.
If your child runs into you in the middle of the night and says, Dad, there's a monster under my bed. I can't sleep. There's a monster there. Do you scoop the child up and run out into the street and say, please, Army, there's a monster in my house. Come and rescue us. If you think of anxiety as the child, so the child is that part of your mind and it's saying, I'm worried about something.
Mm-hmm.
I'm worried about this exam that's coming up or this job interview that's coming up, or, I'm going on a first date. I'm worried about it.
Mm-hmm. And
your job is to say, it's okay, fine to be worried. If we weren't worried about things, we wouldn't bother preparing. That's anxiety is there to say, put your best clothes on, look nice. So when people can understand what anxiety is and listen to it, your anxiety is telling you you're not safe because when you were little, something happened to you. I don't know, not a great example, but understanding that if you listen to your mind, say, okay, this is something I do need to be anxious about, and it's a good thing, or it's something that I can deal with, or actually, no, it's like the monster under the bed. I don't need to be worried about it. I'm okay. I've got this. So anxiety is an interesting one. But then there's things like pain management, migraines, tinnitus. There's a lot of things that physical things that can be helped as well.
Yeah, I think the pain is key. I know a handful of people in my life that take gobs and gobs of pain medication, but I think the pain, though they feel the pain, I think it's being manifested from their mind because of they get into this ruminating thinking and then they think, oh, well, I have to have this medication. And it actually isn't even curing their pain. It's, they're just taking it. And I'm like, man, if you just, maybe you should stop and see what your base level is, because, pain is a real thing and pain management is needed in some cases, but I think a lot of people psych themselves up, and your mind is very, very powerful, and it can create pain, physical pain.
Yes, and pain is pain. Pain hurts.
Yep.
If you are anticipating pain, your mind will go into the fight or flight response, and therefore you'll tense up, and therefore any small pain will be amplified because you're expecting it and you're scared about it, you're worried about it. And therefore that little twinge, which if I was relaxed and calm, I'd go, oh yeah, it's a little twinge, is all of a sudden is a huge crammer. And therefore I need to take the pills. So pain is something I have to be a little bit careful about to make sure there's obviously no medical reason. But if they've been signed off and the doctor said, look, there is no reason for you to be feeling this pain, then we can go in and talk to the mind and say, guys, you don't need to do this anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Kind of on the anxiety thing, I dealt with PTSD and anxiety and the expecting something bad to happen, looking out my window, seeing if somebody's out there to break into my car or to whatever, because coming back from a war zone, I was in Iraq in 2003, 2004. That's a whole nother topic. But, coming back with that anxiety, that post-traumatic stress, and, it took so long to be able to understand. It's like, that's just something that happened in your life. That isn't who you are. That's not something that's going to happen again. It's just, that was just a little phase in your life. And to have people like you helping people free themselves of that is incredible.
Yeah. Your mind was trying to protect you.
Yeah.
But it was working on a situation which was no longer relevant.
Yep.
But your mind didn't know that. It's the one way I explain it to people is like a meerkat. The little meerkats that stand up and looking around, saying you're all fine.
Yes.
And you think, guys, chill out. You can relax. There's no danger. And it can be very powerful. You don't forget what happened, but you can put it in the right context.
Yeah, it's not who you are anymore. No.
Exactly.
I'm curious about the process of how you work with people. Is it a talk therapy?
Yes. So I say that we have the initial consultation. We make sure that we can work together. And what we use to communicate with the subconscious, because normally your conscious mind will jump in with answers, is what's called IMRs, which are idiomotor responses. If you think about it, you're sitting there now. If you had a glass of water next to you and you happen to knock it, you grab it subconsciously before you were consciously aware of what was going on. So your body can move independently of your conscious thought. We walk, we drive, we play sports without consciously thinking we need to move this muscle, that muscle. So what we do is I ask the subconscious to lift a finger or a thumb, one finger for yes, a yes response, and another finger for a no response. And forgive my language, but when people say, fuck me, my fingers are moving without me being aware of it, without me doing anything, I know that it's the subconscious talking. So I say to the subconscious, I need to talk to the part of the subconscious which is creating this anxiety, or which is still trying to figure out that this traumatic event, or still thinks smoking is a good idea. So we talk directly to that part of the subconscious and say, look, you've done a great job. What you were doing was valuable and useful, but now it's not. Are you happy to change? And 99 times out of 100, the subconscious goes, oh, yeah, okay, yeah, sorry, didn't realize. And people sort of sit there and go, I had a very good example recently. I was working with a lady who had a gastric sleeve operation, so big bariatric surgery for weight loss.
Yeah.
But she couldn't stop eating chocolate. She was hiding chocolate. She was getting up in the middle of the night to eat chocolate. And she said, this is so ingrained. I've done this all my life. We did one session. I said to the subconscious, chocolate is not good for you anymore. Stop eating it. And it was literally that conversation. And she said, I really fancy a piece of melon now. And I heard from her over Christmas, this was back in October time. She said, the first Christmas, I have not eaten any chocolate.
Wow.
I have not eaten a piece of chocolate since we first spoke.
That's amazing. The mind is incredible. And people like you who are able to kind of access it and get down into that core subconscious and remove some of that stuff. It's amazing. And I wish people would reach out and get these kind of, it seems like it's not easy, but it's doable.
Absolutely doable. Yeah. And again, the whole therapy industry or mental wellness industry is sort of predicated on, well, we're the experts and you need us. And, we're going to do all these things. And the drug industry obviously is massive.
Yeah.
I'm not going to talk about that, but
we'll get banned.
But, we are fairly simple animals at the end of the day. We think a certain way. We can change the way we think, and that will solve the problems. And again, that's why in the final session that I do with people, I teach them how to do it for themselves. Because I want them to be able to talk to their own subconscious, to be able to go, okay, I'm worried about this. I don't need to be worried about it, or I need to take X action and just live happy lives. That's
what we're
what
looking
I'm here
for,
for.
everybody.
Yeah, exactly. And, if people could understand more about themselves rather than looking for external sources of happiness and treatment, then, the world would be a happier place. But there's not that much money in it.
Yeah, I'm learning that with a lot of different things right now in the cancer industry, unfortunately, and there's a lot of stuff that's coming out that's helping people that is very cheap, and it doesn't make people money, and so they're trying to push things under the rug. And so I'm not trying to be conspiratorial, but that's seems
there is certainly a balance to be had between accepting everything that you're told and seeing ghosts behind everything. But something I learned today, I was reading an article that said the reason why antidepressants are losing their sort of flavor of the month is a lot of the original patents have run out. So there's not as much money in it for the pharmaceuticals anymore. So they're going, well,
on to the next.
Look, but exactly, on to the next thing.
Yeah, I took SSRIs on and off for 20 years. And I mean, there was a couple that really, when I was, not out of my mind, but anxiety ridden and stuff, and they kind of brought me down a little bit, but it didn't resolve any of the issues. It just kind of masked it a little bit so you could live another day. So getting to the root of these problems and dealing with them at a subconscious level is the key. However you go about doing that. I did it through psychedelics, and that just worked for me. I didn't know about remedial hypnotherapy, or I would have tried it a long time ago before making that leap.
But so again, we're all looking for happiness all the time, and it does get more difficult, and there are more voices, there are more noises, there are more try this, try that, and so we try to keep things as simple as possible, and because it's your mind, there are only so many things going on. You can't just chuck everything at it and just wait for something to work. You've got to work within yourself.
Yeah, and this seems like an excellent place to start. I just never have heard about it, and I've talked to therapists, at the Veterans Administration in the United States, and you go in there and they're just overwhelmed with people. You walk in there and tell me your problem. Here's a script. See you later. That's all the help you get, unfortunately. And it's not necessarily their problem. It's just there's too many people to deal with. Yeah.
I think it is important to say as well, though, sometimes that there are about 10% of people who don't respond to hypnosis. We don't know why, but there are about 10% of people we call super responders, and their fingers, they'll be like they're playing piano. Most people are in between. So it doesn't work for absolutely everybody. And again, that's why we have the free consultation to make sure that we've got the best chance of succeeding.
Yeah. And I don't want people to think that I'm saying all medication is bad. It works well for some people.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I just want to put that out there before we get trashed.
With some SSRIs, just bringing people down to a level where they can communicate and they can operate is a good thing. But as you say, they can't resolve the problem.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. Do you want to kind of chat a little bit about your horses? Because my grandfather was a horse race trainer. I never got I never got to experience having horses, but I've always had an affinity for them. I was just looking at a house that has 5 horses on the property, and they come with the property if we buy it. So,
okay. That could be a crash course. They think of amazing ways to hurt and kill themselves on a regular basis. You can go out and they're absolutely fine, and you go out and they've got their legs sticking up like that or whatever. But I mean, I always had a love affair with horses. I didn't get my first horse until 15 years ago, and he's still here. He's still going strong. I think they in terms of the way they communicate is amazing. The horses have been around for about 5 million years. And what they've done, which lots of other animals haven't done, is actually survive.
Mm-hmm.
Because they have a very sensible process of, if there's a problem, they run first and ask questions later.
It's a good way to live.
Yeah. But they are amazing at teaching people how to communicate, and they're non-judgmental. So if you say to somebody, okay, here's a horse, there's no rope connecting you. I want you to take that horse from one end of the field to the other. Now, some people will go, oh, nice horsey, and give it a stroke. And will you please come with me? And the horse goes, no. Other people will go, right, horse, you are going to listen to what I say, and you're going to come with me. And the horse goes, absolutely not. So you have to create a relationship of trust and respect. So the horse goes, okay, one, I trust you and I respect you. And if you want to go over there and you're going with intention, I'm going to come with you. And that's the basis of any human relationship, whether it be with a partner, whether it be with a colleague, whether it be with an employee. You've got to have trust and respect. If you don't have those, then you're not going to succeed. And horses do that without any preconceived ideas. So if you do that exercise and you get it wrong, they're not going to say, oh, well, you got it wrong last time, I'm not going to pay you any attention. Like, okay, no, you can go again. And if you get it right this time, then yeah, I'll come with you.
We can learn from that. For sure.
Yeah. And they're such big, noble animals that you can't push them around. They weigh, 1,000 pounds.
Yeah. They're the ones on this property. They're beautiful, but one of them's like 34 years old, and she's an old girl, and she's just hanging in there.
Oh, yeah, that's a massive age for a horse. So yeah.
So we'll see what happens. I don't know. I would love to have horses, but it changes my whole life.
Yeah, and you would certainly need somebody living in or working with you to look after them, because they have very imaginative ways of hurting themselves.
My wife was raised with horses and she's all about it. So we got that covered, and my kids, they're dying to have a farm with horses and stuff. So we'll see how it all works out.
That's a brilliant way to live.
What am I missing? Anything that you would like to share?
Not really, just to say that I can work with people in the States, even with the time difference. I have got colleagues in the States. I've got a colleague in Seattle and another in Idaho who trained under the same basis. So I'm very happy to share with their details as well.
How do people get a hold of you then?
Best way is either via www.outly.com, which is my own personal website, or we have a collective, which is www.thecontrolpractitioners.com. They can contact us there. Very happy to chat with anybody. I'd love to work with you, Tim.
I'm very interested to do it, and then I'll let people know how it goes, and we'll do a follow-up or something like that. I really appreciate your time. This was informative. I've never heard about it, and you broke it down beautifully for me and for everybody listening. And so I will tag you and everything, and get this put out ASAP. And
fantastic.
I really do appreciate your time. So you're a beautiful soul. Thank you so much.
No.